Just thrilled to see so many people. So are you okay? Is everyone okay if we just give it 2 more minutes, I think, before we officially begin?
Sure.
Okay. All right. And Ilda, hello. I'm glad you've made it too.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. It's amazing.
I'm glad you're part of it. It's did you end up receiving the book?
I did receive it. Thank you so much. We've been on quite a roller coaster ride, very new to the process. So it's been quite helpful. Thank you so much.
Great. So while we're waiting, I just want to draw people's attention to the chat so that you can contribute some thoughts and ideas. So the chat is where is the chat? The chat.
There she is.
No, where Alex, come and help me identify where the chat is.
Down
The
at the
chat.
very bottom of the screen, side share screen.
Here.
Oh, it's under. Oh, right. So for me, I had to press the 3 dots that said more.
Yeah, she's got a long.
Can everyone please put themselves on mute just so we can.
Right. Okay. So before we begin, that would be a great thing. Everyone, please put themselves on mute, and also stop your video so that you're not on screen. And if you want to, and let's just everyone open up their chat. And so that, oh, Alex sent a hello to everyone. That's great. And so please, I'm going to ask you here, please let me know here if you are, if you would like me to add your name to my mailing list, and then you can get all the updates of all the resources and the events that I'm going to be holding. So just let me know. It's also a place that as we go through, if you have questions or comments around what we're talking about, you can add it from there. Also, yes, and as Marnie did, if you can just maybe put in the chat and say where you're from, because I think many people are from away, as they would say in Newfoundland. All right, so let us begin. So welcome. Right now we have 21 people on. That's very exciting. I want to welcome you all and thank you for being a part of this evening. So tonight we have the privilege of having a panel of parents and grandparents to talk about their experience, their insights, their wisdom around having a trans child in the family. And that's what we're going to be speaking about this evening. So we will be having, they'll have questions to address, and we'll be talking about lots of different aspects of what it's like to have a trans child. So Alex, I'd like to introduce Alex first, Alexandra. So thank you, Alex. Alex will be here. She'll be a kind of disembodied voice, but I wanted you to meet her because she'll be reading out some of the questions and helping me with those as we get going. And there are questions, she'll be able to help me field those. So thank you, Alex. And if you have any technical issues that you need Alex to fix, your sound is, you can't hear whatever, just send a note to Alex in the chat and she'll be able to address that. So Before I introduce my esteemed panel, I would first like to introduce myself, Suzanne Shurkin. I am one of the 3 authors of the book When Gender is in Question, A Guide to Understanding. I wrote the book and included also my son Skylar, who has written a foreword and also a chapter around his lived experience and his transition. And then the other author in the book is Dr. Helma Zeidel, who is a 30-year practitioner as a gender specialist and has written about her experience, her clinical knowledge and understanding around working with people who are transitioning. So the book is an intention to inform people, to bring some light into this topic, and it's particularly valuable these days because there has recently been a rash of anti-trans legislation being passed in the United States, and it's so informing ourselves about this topic is good for us. It's good for people in our community, and it's good because we get to pass that along to others. To that end, around informing people around this topic, I am running these monthly dialogues, and every month, so this is the 3rd one. And I'm really excited to say that I'm just now, as we speak, I'm developing a YouTube channel. So that means that all these dialogues will be very accessible. So that's a very exciting new development. And then, so also, this is my first call to action. I'm hoping to get the book out into bookstores. Right now, it's at any bookstore around the world can actually buy it because I am with Ingram Books. It's an American distributor. The magic place that if you're there, then any bookstore can have it. So I'm trying to get it into bookstores. And the other thing, and here's a call to action, I'm really trying to get it into schools. To administrators, to teachers, of course, so that they can teach it. And I'm developing a series of teaching aids for students and for parents. And so I'm hoping to get it into schools, into secondary and post-secondary schools across the country and through the States. So my call to action is that if you have any contacts that you can connect me with in these areas, that please let me know, call me, send me smoke signals, whatever works, and I would love to get your information. So thank you for that. So I have a poll for you just to get a sense of where you're all coming from. And so can you see this? I've just launched this.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you can just, it's anonymous. I don't know who you are. If you could just put your name, or rather just identify if you're a parent of a trans child, a grandparent, a sibling, a friend or ally, if you're a trans or gender questioning person yourself, or other, that is none of the above. Just so I can get a sense of who you are. And that will, I think that will help also guide the questioning. Okay, so there's a lot of other, and I don't even know what I mean by other. I just put other because that was it. So, now you can see that. All right. Lots of friends. Trans people, there's a great variety. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Those who identified other, is there anyone who wanted to say what what that is? Okay. Counselor, psychologist. Okay, perfect. All right. So at this moment, I would very much like to introduce the panel. And Angie, if I can ask you to put your shiny face on the screen, that would be great. Great, thank you. Okay. So we have 4 people on the panel. Giselle Block, Maureen McBride, Hugh Hagin, and Angie Stiles. And I would like each of you to give a little introduction of your of yourself and your relationship to the trans person in the family, beginning with Giselle.
Hi everyone, I'm Giselle Block. My pronouns are she, her, and been on this journey for quite some time. My eldest child is transgender, although he's not a child. At 18, he came out as a transgender man. As a lesbian first at 18, and then at 22, he told us he was transgender and would be transitioning to male. And he's almost 29 now. And that's how I got involved in what I do. I am a board member of Toronto PFLAG. It's an organization that supports the LGBTQ2SI community. So running monthly support meetings. So I've been facilitating support meetings for about 5.5 years with them, 3 a month, and talk to a lot of parents and a lot of trans individuals as well. So it's been keeping me busy over the last 5 years.
It's so great, Giselle. And can you actually also talk about the other organizations that you're affiliated with?
Sure. I also co-facilitate a support meeting in Toronto called Transceptance, and it's hosted by Central Toronto Youth Services. Everything is online right now. And
I'm just going to put that in the chat. Trans,
sure.
TRANCEPT.
TRANS CE, Transceptance. So Transceptance is a support group only for parents and direct caregivers of trans youth, young adults, individuals, non-binary individuals, and as opposed to Toronto PFLAG, where the kids or the LGBTQ2S community members can attend as well. Transceptance is specifically for parents and a safe space to share their concerns and get support. And in addition, I co-facilitate a group through Jewish Family and Child Services called the Jewish Rainbow Alliance, which is the same thing. It's a support group for parents. So I do a lot of supporting and a lot of talking with people.
Okay, thank you. And I've just put that in the chat, those two, and your name as well. So in case anyone wants to, I don't know if I spelled Transceptance right, but if anyone wants to connect and find out more, they can send a note to you in the chat right now, and you can directly connect with them.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Maureen.
Hi there.
Welcome, Maureen.
Hi there. I'm Maureen McBride. I'm very new at this. So my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the grandparent of a very young individual. And she is from, so was born a male. And when she was not long after 3 years old, she said to me, "I'm done pretending, Nana. And I said, what do you mean? What are you pretending about? She says, I'm not really a boy, I'm really a girl. So that started, she's going to be 10 in June. So we have, the whole family is very loving and accepting of her. And I'm so proud of that. My son is very, very much involved as a hands-on father. It was hard for him at first, but he's just been gangbusters with everything. So again, I said I'm new with this. I just want to do everything I can to learn the best. And I read the book and it's incredible. And I'm not doing that to try and plug your book, but it's incredible. It really helped me a lot. And I think especially educators and any part of the social system would really, it's invaluable for that. So thank you very much for everybody coming here, and thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you. Hugh Hagin.
Hey, everybody. Hugh Hagin, parent of Skylar Hagin, one of the co-authors of the book. Susie and I were married for 18 years and have a couple of great kids that we're both very proud of. Skylar Skylar came out to me one evening. We were out at a restaurant, and he said, "Dad, I've got something to tell you." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "I am lesbian." And that's literally the first definite connection that I had with him, at that time her. And it's been nothing but wonderful since. He and I had, I would say, probably a bit of a distant relationship when he was younger. He spent a lot of time in his head, in his room, being very private, and even I guess a little bit surly, I would say. But since having the chutzpah to tell me about where he was at, my immediate reaction was getting up from the table in the restaurant we were at and walking around to the other side of the table and giving him the biggest hug I could, and congratulating him on being so brave. Told them that I was proud of him and I loved him deeply, and also that he had chosen a very difficult road. And I think we've continued in that vein of love and honesty ever since, and spend lots of time together, one-on-one or with his partner, who is also gay. And we just love each other. We have great conversations, and we don't talk a lot about his gender. When I'm out with him, I introduce him as my son. I never bring up the fact that he's transgender. He doesn't appear transgender, but even if he was, sort of androgynous in that way, I still wouldn't. I mean, to me, that's a private matter. I don't walk around introducing other people that I know that are, heterosexual as here's my heterosexual daughter or friend or what. It's just, this is Skylar. This is my son. And he handles himself very well and is very capable of doing that. And I do not worry about him. He, of course, is very aware of some of these changes and in laws and restrictions coming out, and is concerned about them and follows them. and can talk about them. But that's not part of our relationship. We just are father and son, and it's been a wonderful experience for both of us.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you. Angie. Angie Stiles.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Angela Stiles. I go by she, her pronouns. I live in Rockwood, Ontario, which is about an hour from Toronto. I'm married to a teacher whose name is Brent, and I have 2 daughters. Kira is 22 and Emma is 19. Both are struggling with online university, so I hear that daily. Kira is my trans daughter. She came out to me when she was 18. What was unique about her coming out process was it was just to me only, and she asked that I not tell anybody else. So I actually have a kind of a different story to tell in terms of how this all kind of unraveled in our family. But the good news is, as she does this in stages, all of our family is very supportive. I'm a sergeant in the OPP, so I've been offered many training opportunities. I'm an LGBTQ2S plus ally, and I've been trained in positive space as a safe place for people to come into my office. I'm also on the West Region OPP Inclusion Council and the OPPA Equity and Inclusion Committee. Actually not representing the LGBTQ2S community. It's actually a nice perspective I can bring, but I was actually injured on duty. I was shot in 2010. So I represent officers who are persons with disabilities. So I bring that perspective, but now I can bring perspective of being a mother and having a trans family member. Kira has informed me she is a femme lesbian, and she just landed her first job applying as a trans person in a unique situation that her documents don't show her as her preferred name is Kira. So she's kind of in a unique transition period, and she'll be starting estrogen HRT shortly. And the book has been really good. Again, I'm not like wanting to spend a lot of time talking about the book, but I will say it's been a great tool to expose, especially my mom and my dad and Brent's mom and dad, to transgendering. Their generation just didn't speak about it, or they weren't trained like I have been. So it's been a great tool, open up the discussion. So yeah, I would describe my daughter Kira as very brave, and I'm coming as from a perspective of as a cop. So yeah, that's sort of our story.
Thanks. Thank you, Angela. As you can see, thank you for all of you. I mean, all of you have been really open about your different situations. And I want to say, and I'm going to in a minute put up a question to begin. But what I do want to say, and I want to just sort of invite everyone's listening to the idea that there is no one trans story, as everyone will attest to. I mean, we all have, we each represent parents or grandparents of male to female, female to male, or somewhere in the middle. And so as we go through this, what's going to be clear is that there's no right or wrong. There is just love. To quote, the songs, but there is no right or wrong. I mean, each of us has had a different experience and have handled our situations differently. So that's, I just want to tune you into that. I'm going to just share my screen and begin. Okay, everyone can see that, right? Yes, yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so this is the first question that I'd like to pose everyone, and I'm just so how we're doing this is there's I've got a series of questions that we that the four of us identified as kind of key areas, and so we'll just do a round robin, and as we go through this, please everyone who is here attending, um, please put in your comments about what you hear, what you feel about what you hear, any questions, because we're here to provide answers for you and greater insight for you. So the first question is, how do we talk about our kids pre-transition? That is to say, you know, and so I know that there are actually very different opinions, and I did write about this in the book about how we all have a different approach to how we handle that. What do we do with the birth name? Because all our kids have changed their name that was assigned at birth to a name that they prefer. And what do we do with all those old photos? All of us have thousands of photos, right? What do we do with the photos? And how do we go about talking about old stories when they were a different gender or different, they identified differently, certainly had a different name. So that's a question I'd like to pose. Uh, anyone want to jump in first and begin to talk about that? Giselle.
Sure, I'll break the ice.
All right.
So as Suzanne mentioned, every situation is unique. Every person transitions in their own way. So I'm just going to talk about our situation, our family, our story, and what we do. So do we ever use their birth name? Absolutely not. And that's non-negotiable. I've given many presentations, and often I get the question, what was Lucas's name before? And I say, why is that relevant? That's his name now, and that's how we refer to him. So that's a very simple answer. What do we do with old photos? We get this question asked a lot in support meetings. Parents ask us all the time what they do with old pictures. And my suggestion, and the same thing that we did in our house, you ask your child, what do they want you to do with all the pictures that are up? Some kids don't mind leaving them out. Some kids want them gone. It's very personal and it's totally up to them. In our situation, I asked Lucas, I really thought that he would want me to get rid of them. We had 22 years worth of pictures all over the house. And I asked him, and he said, Mommy, you can't erase the first 22 years of my life. I want the pictures out. And, you know, the most interesting thing is now he has 2 kids and a wife to go along with them. And when they look, and the older one is almost 8. So when they look at these family pictures and pictures of Lucas pre-transition, I mean, there are pictures of a kid with pigtails, there are pictures of a kid in a bikini, and you know, they look at these pictures and there's like, oh, that's Uncle Brandon, and that's you, and that's Grandpa, and that's Auntie Jamie, and that's Daddy. You know, this person in a bikini, that's Daddy, and that's Daddy, and that's Daddy. You know, all these pictures that we have. So, you know, kids are, I think, very adaptable and certainly understand, you know, they understand their dad is trans. He was born a certain way, and that's the way it is. And what do we do about family stories? I personally will always refer to Lucas in the past as Lucas and as he. And the reason that I do this is because very early on, shortly after he declared his trans identity, one of our family members, we were, you know, having a family dinner. Remember those days when we could actually do that? we were having family dinner, and he said to Lucas, "So, Lucas, have you given any thought about the man you would like to become?" And Lucas said, with all due respect, "I've always been a man. I have always been a guy. Now I'm going to change some things about myself so that the rest of the world sees me as the man I have always been." And when he told me that, that's when I really started to understand what gender identity meant. And I realized that I needed to refer to him in the past as he, him, and with his name Lucas. So when I tell stories about when he was 3, I will say when Lucas was 3, or when Lucas was 6, or when Lucas did this, or when Lucas did that. And the only thing that I can't say is when Lucas was a little boy. I've never actually used those words because at the time I thought he was a little girl. But whenever I talk about him, I always refer to him in the past as he, and that's it. You know, I also can't imagine being somewhere and talking about him, about my son, and then I would say, well, when she was little, and you know, people would say, "What do you mean?" And that would out him. Like, people don't need to know necessarily that he's transgender, or people that don't know don't need to know. So, you know, we don't want to do that. So that's sort of all the background and my reasoning for the way I refer to my son pre-transition.
Thanks, Giselle. I hear it. It sounds very clear. It's very clear. No birth assigned name used, and identity clear in as a male. No equivocal discussion there. Yeah. And when you have that kind of boundary, it makes it clear how to move ahead, the language to use, how to discuss everything. And it's very cool to hear that his kids are saying, "There's Daddy," even though they may be pointing to a picture of him in a bikini. "There's Daddy." Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Angie.
So I kind of have a different situation than what you may have just heard now. And that is, so Kira is doing her transition. Her outing process is taking years. As I said, she came out to me when she was 18, and she's now 21 and still hasn't talked about her transition to some church members and some friends. Most of our family know. So it's in a unique situation we have here, and we're just taking all the cues from her. This is how she wants to do it. There's not a doubt in my mind or hers that she, well, although was born male, is female. There's no doubt about that. It's just she's approaching it the way she wants to. So it seems a bit odd for me to have to bounce between her birth name and Kira, but that's the situation that she's chosen. So we're trying to make it as smooth as possible. It's more difficult for me and my husband than it is for her, I think. So an example is she applied recently to the county library, and in the letter, because she's still, and her hair's growing long, she's wearing femme clothes. The issue was she applied and she had to use her birth name because all her documents say that. But in the letter, she says she wants to be referred to as Kira, which was well received by the employer. But here's where it takes a little twist, is they sent her a letter recently saying that she needed to do a criminal record check because it's a vulnerable sector and she needs to get this. And the letter came in under Kira. And I had to explain to Kira that she actually has to go back to the employer and say, no, my birth name is still, the male name. And that, so we're in this kind of weird phase, but what we're finding, what's more important is that the people around us, like the library, the people around us are so flexible too. So, Kira has an approach where she's very tolerant. She'll correct people, the people who she's talked to about like pronouns and stuff, but she's very patient and understanding through this process. Like I said, some church members don't know, some friends don't know, but our family do. As for photos, again, we did the same thing. We asked her what she wanted. She said she was fine with the old photos. So they're up, but if at any point she wishes them to be removed, we will. And with this family story, so an example was, so tonight we were looking for her birth certificate for this crim record check. And all we referred to her as, we're looking for Kira's birth certificate. We're looking for Kira. So whenever we actually talk about her in the past, we talk about her and refer to her as Kira. Because everybody in the family is comfortable with that. We stumble every so often, but Kira's very supportive and flexible. As we make some mistakes, we correct ourselves. Even I sometimes will, if I'm really mad, and I'll use her birth name, which is totally by error. Just after 22 years, it might happen, but she's very understanding. I correct myself, and it's a process, a journey that we're going through. And like I said, she came out to me when she was 18, so I've had to know this, and it was difficult for almost 2-3 years, me knowing she's female, but still referring to her as a birth name. So we have a kind of a unique situation, but that's kind of how we're handling it here.
Thank you, Angie. It sounds like you are really taking your lead from Kira and letting her guide how and when and who and the degree to which things are taking place. So there's a lot of honoring there. Yeah, yeah. Honoring in a to this, Giselle, you were talking about your approach, and that's, you are honoring as well, of course. So as we can hear, it's all different stories, different approaches. Hugh, would you like to talk about your approach to your answers?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. These questions are making me think about things that I don't normally think about. For example, do I ever use Skylar's birth name? I certainly have, particularly when I've mistakenly referred to him by his birth name. I didn't. Skylar had a beautiful birth name that I was very fond of, and it's been an adjustment for me. And now it's automatic, so this doesn't happen often. But when I was talking with him about him to other people, my friends would say, "You just called him by his birth name," and half the time I hadn't even realized it. So it's my mind is now used to the fact that he is who he is, and he has a different name. But I don't think. I'm pretty sure Skylar was never offended by me using his birth name, because, listen, he knows very well what his name was at birth, and lived with that for the first 15 or 16 years of his life. So I think often it's people around the transgender kids that are upset about the fact that, oops, we just said something. I hope we didn't upset them. These are well-adjusted kids in many ways. They've lived in their heads in many ways before they came out and announced who they were going to become or who they now were. I think we're all human, and we all forgive each other for minor mistakes and possibly not using the correct pronoun, whatever it may be. Not to say that it's not a great idea, but I think that if it slips out every once in a while by accident, that's okay too. We're humans. Old photos, I mean, they're out there. I'm not a revisionist. I'm not trying to pretend the past wasn't the past, that it wasn't very real. It was very real. In our case, Skylar was a bit of a tomboy, always, and would never have been caught in a bikini. Would like to wear cutoffs and a t-shirt a whole lot. Well, that's fairly acceptable in both sides, in both camps. So I've never found myself holding back photographs of any of my family members if there's an occasion to show them. Secondly, if I'm showing family photographs of the past, typically it's with people that are close to me, who already know the story. So there's nothing that I'm trying to hide from those people that they wouldn't catch me out on. And I don't do that anyway. And family stories, the same. If I'm talking family stories in a setting, it's with people that I care about. I'm not walking up to people on the street and saying, guess what what song we sang around the campfire out in campground XYZ. It was, people know. And people that I would be talking to about family stories and showing old photographs and so forth. There's nothing to hide. And if anything, Skylar comes out so much stronger and less vulnerable as his new self. He's a pleasure to be around. He's a very solid person and presents that way in his new role, better than he presented in his old role, I would say, if I had to make a judgment there. So I don't make any effort to hide the past or change the way history unfolded.
Thank you, Hugh. And so as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing the language that you're using, which is different than the language Giselle would use, which is different than the language that Angie used, and so I really want to point that out because this is not about making anyone wrong here, because we're all just learning new language, new ways of talking about this arena of thinking, and we're all at different stages of information and different stages of comfort with and different stages of how we our own relationship to this topic and to those we know who are transitioning or questioning. So I really just wanted to identify that. This is not about right or wrong. It's just really about.
Sure. I'm not trying to put a value judgment on it at all. I'm just trying to relate to you how I have dealt with this or worked with this new information. And that's the only point I'm trying to make.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for all that. And and I can just pipe up here too, as as the other parent to Skylar. I have lots of photos of our young when our family was young, and that's just how it is. I don't hide any family photos. I'm very proud of my family at all stages, and but like you, Hugh, I don't use Skylar's birth name as much as I'm misusing that name. I don't use it either, and so that's. Yeah, so we're on the same page around that. Thank you. Maureen, you're on mute though. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Well, actually, we've been very blessed with Olivia coming out so early. That I had a lot of photos. I had a lot of videos. I have a lot of videos with her singing, actually, and she doesn't even want to look at them. She doesn't want to have anything to do with her name, or we've been so lucky that she's led all of us. She's been able to tell us, to teach us how she wants. I think that's we are so blessed that she was able to express herself. And so she's always been allowed to be the gender that she always was born. So really, for the first 3 years of her life, she was treated as a boy, which she rebelled against incredibly. And like I said, she's always led us. So the photos, I'm going to sit down, and I've talked with mom and dad, my son and the mother, that I want to be alone with her and show her the videos, because actually it was because of Frozen that she actually had the courage to come out, and I was videotaping her because I'm a singer, and so I've always trained the kids and my grandkids, um, not to sing, but they've always sang, and I'm always videotaping them and recording them. So I have a lot of those photos and videos. So I'm going to be sitting down with her and showing them to her and asking her if that's what she wants. Does she want me to just, I can't erase them ever, but I will never show them to anybody if she doesn't want me to. I would never do that. And again, I said I'm really new at this, so I thank Giselle and Angie and you, Suzanne, for helping me along with my language, because it certainly is a learning curve. We got the pronouns very, very, for the most part. My mom, who was great grandma, she had a really hard time with the pronouns, but she got it, and she was great. Family stories, well, again, she was 3, so we're so lucky. And I thank you all for sharing your stories, and I hope to hear of anybody else in the audience who might have younger children, and what you've been through as well.
Thanks, Maureen. And what's so great about hearing your story is that your grandchild came out really young, really, really young, and all of us have a story of our child coming out at different ages, and that's just what their experience is and their story is. And so it's learning for all of us at different stage, because and so there are different parenting and grandparenting lessons to be learned when the child is really young, and different ones when they're teen or in their 20s or older. So yeah, so that's why every story is different, and it's just it's a transition experience for each of us. So thank you all. And I just want to stop for a moment. I'm just going to stop and find out if there's anyone who would like a question answered, or would like to address any of the panelists to ask something more about their relationship to their child pre-transition and how they're handling that. Is there anyone who has a question or comment? Okay. All right. No one. Well, then I will carry on. So I have another question that I'd like to pose everyone. And this is, so the question is, did you experience grief or loss when your child transitioned? So this is an interesting question for all of us, because our child, whether they identify at 3 or at 30, there is a shift that we are but getting used to, that we're working with them in their transition and supporting them in their transition to their authentic gender identity. And as Giselle has so eloquently said, just identifying who they always were, and we're now becoming more tuned to that. There is, however, on a very real level as a parent, or grandparent a sense that the child that we came to know as in their birth identity is now changed. I mean, Hugh talked about not using the name that he has come to associate, the birth name of Skylar, and he misses that. So, there is a bit of grief or a bit of loss around that. And I want to check in with you about that and about how you might want to talk about that. Anyone care to start that conversation?
Since you you brought my name into it.
All right, Angie.
I wouldn't characterize it as grief at all, and loss. I mean, I just think that I prefer listening. The birth name, I think, had a beautiful sound to it, and had meaning with respect to your own background as well. But in general, I have to say that I don't have grief or a big sense of loss. It's just different. And, as soon as we accept the fact that this is the reality of the situation, and you start to work with that, rather than grieving I mean, the child is still a child. They're still the same person with a different, sexual gender identity. But personally, I have a much better relationship now with Skylar than I did with him when he was, a girl. So no, I have to say no to both. I don't experience that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Hugh. Angie.
I kind of broke this response into two sections. The first one is I almost describe this as an adjustment. So, Kira she describes it as herself as a femme lesbian, and so I noticed a different type of confidence that came out with her. Only though even though she came out to me when she was 18, she only came out to my husband and my daughter in December. So we're talking about quite recently. And then so quite recently did I see this complete kind of a confidence change. And I noticed it when she started wearing very feminine clothes. She started taking my makeup. She took all my makeup. And so I noticed that was an adjustment. But at the same time, where I noted grief was kind of what I experienced when, and it was like a heartbreak. And that's when I started to really see, as she became more confident, as she came out to the family, and her dysphoria got worse. And I noticed those days are bad, and I can tell when they're bad. But an example is because she transitioned after puberty, she will shave to the point that she bleeds, and she will shave so hard that she will come out of the bathroom and her face is covered with tissues trying to block, and you can see the rashes, and it breaks my heart because, and so it's a kind of a grief, but it's a grief that can't be fixed. It's just me experience how she's trying to live her authentic self in a body that's not necessarily matching her gender at this point. So I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but that's kind of the emotions I'm going through.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Angie. And I hear almost a description of the grief that Kira is feeling around her having to reconcile this body that's and doing these things that aren't her, growing facial hair and that she wish wasn't there. Yeah, thank you. Giselle. what grief or
I'm
loss
talking
are,
while I was muted.
Mm.
Um, I didn't really tell you much about Lucas's history prior to declaring his trans identity. From puberty until 22, so roughly a decade, those years were full of self-harm and self-medication and mental health issues. Prior to puberty, he wanted to play hockey, and he wanted to play basketball and baseball and skateboarded and did all of those things. He only wanted me to buy clothes from the boys section of the store. And that was not an issue, you know, play whatever sports you want. Get exercise, you know, be a kid. Wear whatever clothes you want. Just don't wear shorts in the middle of February. You know, those things weren't that important. But then things started to change for him when puberty came. Breast development, periods, that sort of thing. Those are the things that caused him a lot of anxiety and obviously gender dysphoria. But he didn't know what that was. We didn't know what that was. That word didn't exist in our vocabulary at the time. And, you know, I took him for counseling. He spoke to a number of different people. This was a long time ago. No one clued into the gender piece, you know, that could be the root of this. You know, it took him through his own exploration. So a bunch of things happened. You know, he finished high school. This was my first child. So I just assumed he would just, you know, go on to post-secondary education. He announced that he wasn't going to. He went to work full-time and at a job that he had been working at since he was 15, part-time, and just sort of carried on that way. Came out as a lesbian. Okay, you're interested in girls, not in boys, whatever. And it still took him another 4 years to really understand his gender identity. And, you know, I guess being gay gave him some freedom with his gender expression and the way he presented himself. His hair got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and buzzed. As people misgendered him at the time, thought he was a guy, he realized that made him feel really good. So he was learning about himself, binding, you know, wearing a binder that flattens the chest for anyone that doesn't know what a binder is completely. So, you know, often trans guys will wear many layers of clothing and slouch a lot to hide their chest. And you know, a binder does that too. So, you know, I was sort of watching all of these things. He lived at home. We were very close, but yet that one piece, you know, was missing until he finally figured it out. And I was surprised. This was something that I had not had any experience with. At the time, I had 2 gay kids, but I had no experience with gender identity. I didn't really know what that was. I thought that the gender you're assigned at birth is the gender you are forever. So I was struggling with this, fully supportive, completely accepting, but I took my struggles with it privately. My husband and I would talk about it. The one thing that happened at the very beginning was there was a family in our neighborhood whose kids went to the same school as ours, whose one of their daughters at 19 died of cancer. And this happened, I don't know, a month after Lucas came out. So it put things into a perspective for me that I'm not grieving the loss of a child, or let's say the loss of my daughter, because my kid was alive and well and right in front of me. What I realized that I was struggling with were the loss of some of my own hopes and dreams and expectations for the child that I thought I had. And I had to shift. I had to adjust my way of thinking. I had to unlearn some of the beliefs that I had and relearn some new ideas, some new concepts. I did go back in time and, sort of try to rack my brain about small details and conversations that we had prior, and wondering, had I ever said anything transphobic in the past that could have contributed to the pain that Lucas was dealing with. He since transitioning, he went back to school. He got married to a cisgender woman. About a year after he started to transition, they met. And then he started university at 25. He's in social work. He's actually got one semester left. He'll be finished by the end of the summer. And they had another baby since then, a couple of years ago, and he is unbelievably happy. They bought a house. They're, as much as they can through COVID, they're living regular lives. There is no self-medication. There is no self-harm. There are no mental health issues. He is happy. We're very close, and probably closer than we were before, which I didn't think was possible, but it turned out that way. And when you see your child blossoming into who they really are and being so happy with who they are, that sense of loss gets, at least for me, was sort of counterbalanced with who he was. And we all want our kids to be happy. And I was seeing my child finally find inner peace, find happiness, find joy in life, plan long-term goals for himself instead of talking about suicide, instead of hurting himself. He was living his life to its fullest. And that was, all I wanted for my child.
Thank you, Giselle. It's so powerful hearing your story, hearing everyone's story about how we experienced their transition. And so Maureen, I want to tune into you, but before I tune into you and ask you to respond to this question, I just want to put out there another thought for you all to consider, maybe another go round around associated with grief and loss, and it's around what you said, Giselle, about your loss of dreams, hopes, expectations. And I think that there's, and that's really what I think this is about, because when we have a child who we see through childhood, through puberty, through their, in our case, in the case of me and Hugh, are in early 20s, you do develop, whether consciously or unconsciously, you do develop a sense of expectation of what your child will be, or how they'll pursue their life, or right. There's that. There's also, and I also want to add to this mix, a question about whether there is a difference in the gender of the parent. So, for Hugh, you have now a son to relate to, and you've talked about having a better relationship with Skylar now post-transition. With Angie, you have and you too, Giselle, you have a son to relate to. And Angie and Maureen, you have a daughter to relate to. And so I wonder if there's any difference between how you're relating to that child now, as opposed to Angie, your husband, relating to Kira. And Maureen, I'm wondering if you and your son are relating to your, to your granddaughter differently, or if your son is relating differently, right? And so it was just those kinds of questions that also come up, and there is no right answer, just a curious observation and an inquiry that we all have. So with that, I'd like to turn to Maureen and ask you to comment on this question.
Well, myself, it doesn't matter. I've always been the type of person that it doesn't matter what person is, I will accept anybody. I just love everybody. um, Now my son, on the other hand, so I can, I can see exactly what you're talking about. Everyone's talking about, especially the loss of the expectations. That's where the grief is, and I do believe that's where my son had the hardest time. You know, he's a man's man. He's a tradesman. The industry he's in is male dominated, and I believe that, and it was his first child, and he thought he had his beautiful son, and I'm sure it never in a million years would he have thought that this would have happened to him. And unfortunately, I do believe that that's what happens in a lot of families, is that they actually take it personally. But it's not us that it's happening to, it's the person that it's happening to, you know, our children or our grandchildren or our brother or our sister. So, you know, we have to put everything aside, because it's none of our business, really, what they do with their life. It's how they do it with their life. And we have to love them unconditionally. And that's what's so important, for them to have the most healthiest lifestyle. They need to have a healthy lifestyle. So the grief was absolutely considerable for my son. And the only grief I ever felt was that I felt he lost. That's the way I felt, that he felt he lost his son. And people say he gains a daughter, but I don't know if I see it that way. And again, no one's wrong in this, right? We're all learning. But I just see it as we've gained something so precious to our whole family, that this soul came to us and trusted us enough that she just came out, and she's almost 10 now. So and other than, there's some other you know, issues with that have nothing to do with the gender identity, nothing at all. But they will go in partner with them. We'll have to deal with that as well. But yeah, I didn't experience any type of grief or loss, but that's me. And again, this is all personal. So if you do feel a loss, then you have every right to feel the way that you feel. Everyone does.
Thank you so much for that really personal comment. Those personal comments. Giselle, did you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I wanted to add something because, you know, I've spoken to a lot of parents over the years, and what is often at the root of parents' emotions when their kid starts to transition is fear, worry, anxiety about, is my child going to be safe going out in the world? Is my child going to are they going to be discriminated against? You know, will they be able to find a job? Will they find someone who will love them as a trans identified person? You know, these are natural worries. They're concerns that we all have for our children, for, you know, for their safety and their future and their life, but they're amplified when our child is trans, because we know that there are extra hardships. for trans individuals. So there's that mix of fear that comes into play, and it's really hard to separate it sometimes. Is that grief? Is that fear? Is that worry? You know, what exactly is that? So I just wanted to throw that out there into the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And I completely relate too. You know, I'm not speaking up much here as the moderator, the host, but of course, I had all of those same fears too when Skylar um, began his transition, and he was misgendered, would go into a female bathroom when he hadn't quite transitioned, um, and then he was misgendered as male, and um, you know, not only outed, but the police were called to escort him out, and then he would go into a male bathroom, and he was misgendered there and was followed out and beat up, and you know, all of those things. And so um, absolutely we have fear around our kids because this is a journey that takes courage. It's not for the faint of heart. And you know, as Hugh said in his early comments, our kids have spent a lot of time in their heads, really coming to terms with their own discomfort that we, you know, whether it's dysphoria or discomfort or confusion or questioning, they have had to come to terms with it and be courageous in coming out. Well, now there is a whole universe of antagonism possibly against them. What if you live in the States, if you live in different parts of the world, it's really an unsafe place for our kids who have identified with and are living their true identity. And so for me, if I were to answer this question, the grief and loss is somewhat about safety. You know, as you've said, Giselle, Hugh has identified too that Skylar looks very, he passes really easily for a guy. He's a very handsome young man. And so he's likely not going to be outed as trans. But if he were, and you know, what would that mean? Would his safety be at risk? And so that's where I definitely feel fear around. Yeah. Anyone else want to have anything to say around that, the notions of fear around our kids?
If you don't mind, I
Sure.
actually, I guess I haven't really thought of that as much, and I'm so sorry that the world is the way it is for these beautiful children. And let's hope that the ones, like, the world is changing, and thankfully we do live in a country that is far more accepting than most of the world. And I do believe that that's what you're doing, Suzanne and Giselle and Angie and everybody that is trying to advocate for the necessary um all the different legislations that are going to have to be looked at and changed. And these, I'm hoping that these are going to be the group that brings it all along and changes the way society thinks. And we have to, and I think Angie, by being involved with the protection side of things and the law, and you know, we can get everyone in all different avenues of life to advocate in every way, so that they do feel safe, and that if we educate as much as we possibly can, we can change everyone's, and starting with your book. And just like you saying, if this book could be in schools, because the lower that we can get the kids and then their parents, and I think it's really gonna, there's a huge hope for change. I know it. I see it.
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Maureen. That sounded very hopeful and encouraging. Yeah, thank you. I see Paul, you have your hand up. Please. Did you have a question?
Oh, hi, everyone.
Hi.
Sorry for joining you a little late.
No, glad you're here.
Don't have a video here, but I'll just talk anyways. I would say, I'm 57 and my mom just turned 95 and my father would have been 99 had he lived. And so, and yet I can relate to the same principles that have been talked about recently in terms of gender fluidity. I wish that I had a greater, realm within to explore my identity as a kid. I remember getting this lovely top that had a hood and these puffy sleeves with elastic bands around the wrists. And I maybe I was 11 or 12, and I wouldn't wear it, even though I identified with it. So, because I thought it made me look too, different. And so these kinds of concepts is why I really appreciate Suzanne's, whole gist here, and everyone's participation. I can hear the issues, they resonate across the ages, I guess. I'll say. But so there you go. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. And so I really thank you for being so open here too. And it must, does this resonate with you as you wished you'd had this conversation, not at 57, at 27 or 17 or 7?
Well, it's never going to happen. My father's passed, and my mom's way too old for any of this. Too delicate of a conversation, and yet it's being embodied in this forum, and so for that I'm very appreciative.
So great, thank you, Paul. Anyone else have a comment or a question? Okay, we have 10 minutes left, and there is one more slide that I want to just pass this quickly before, because we only have a few minutes left. But I want to just ask everyone to briefly comment on this. Who do we tell about the transition, and how do we tell others? And that's a really big question. And I think that I'd like everyone to be very quick about it. But I do see that 2 people have raised their hands. So before we answer that, whoever has raised their hands, I can't see. I can just see that 2 people have raised their hands. If anyone wants to speak up, please do so. Whoever has raised their hands.
Giselle, you can go ahead.
Okay. So I asked my son this question: who do I tell? Who do we tell?
Oh, okay.
Are we moving on to this?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize it was you who'd raised your hand. Perfect. That's great.
Who do we tell and who do we not tell? And I went to him to lead the way. because this is his life, it's his journey, it's his story, it's his to tell, it's not mine to tell. And he said, here's the rule of thumb. If it's someone who knew me before I transitioned, then you tell them. You say, former name is now Lucas. He uses he, him pronouns. He's transitioning to male or transitioned to male, depending on when the conversation happened. And that's it. If it's someone that you're meeting after, you say, this is my son, Lucas. That's it. That's all they need to know. So it just depended on who the person was. And, you know, I mean, we live in the same neighborhood we've lived in for 30 years. My kids all went to the local school. I still run into people I don't run into anybody anymore because I don't go anywhere, but, you know, used to run into people at the grocery store or the pharmacy or wherever in the neighborhood. And they would ask, how are the kids? You know, how are your kids? And so those were the people that I was told I should be telling, because we all wanted him to be respected. We didn't want people to refer to him with his old name or the wrong pronouns. We wanted his gender identity to be respected. So so those people needed to know. And anybody else that we encountered just, you know, met him. This was my son, Lucas.
Okay. Yes, thank you for that. I want to ask again if there are any questions that anyone has for any of the panelists, or any comments anyone would like to share.
I think Paul has his hand up.
Yeah, Paul has spoken. I think the hand I think is still there. Yeah.
There was one other person that had his hand up other than Giselle. I'm sorry.
Anyone else? Okay. Okay. Any other panelists would like to talk about how we tell others, or who we even tell? Is that a question? Is that a concern, Angie?
So again, unique situation. Kira only told me and asked me to keep it secret for close to 2 years. We're very close. And then in December, she asked that I actually approach her dad, which is my husband, Brent. So I ended up talking to Brent and explaining what was going on with Kira, and that she was coming out she wanted me to do that. She's not super close with Brent. They have a lot in common and everything, but she just felt this was the safest route. She felt, I didn't want to second guess. She asked me to do it, so I did it. And then with the family, same thing. She asked me to do that with the family. So I taking cues completely from her. And again, family only, and she's asked that we not talk about in front of church members, etc. So very sensitive to not outing her. She did have a situation at school where she wrote a paper, and I think this is what happened is she had this paper she wrote as a female, and though the school recognized her as male, and she actually had a coming out, and they actually investigated her, so to speak, for plagiarism, because they said that she was referring to herself as a female and that they have her as a male, and she had to come out to the professor and whatever this advisory board is. And I think that kind of just unsettled her about the process. And that happened in the fall. So I just take complete direction from Kira. So it's a little different, but if she's happy with that approach, I'm happy to assist her.
Thank you. And again, Angie, it sounds like you are completely taking your lead from your daughter.
Correct.
And so that's great. Yes. Thank you.
We have a question from Marty.
Thank you, Marnie.
Hi, my video is off, but that's okay. But as we're coming to a close, I just would like to say thank you so very, very much to each of the people that were speaking today, and allowing me the privilege of being able to be part of your life. I am absolutely new to this whole process. I'm 80 years of age and I'm a registered nurse by background. I'm very familiar with the journey of the lesbian individual. I have had very special friends that are that in that capacity. I have not experienced the stories that you have shared, but I just want to say thank you to Suzanne for the book, which I'm looking forward to getting, but also just to say how proud I am of all of you as moms and dads and grandparents in supporting our kids. We're all made in God's image and we're all whole in ourselves. So I just want you to know that I have most enjoyed this last hour and a half. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Marnie. That was a beautiful ending to this session. Thank you.